This episode is brought to you by Sabio, the #1 coding bootcamp for veterans. Visit sabio.la/military to learn more. And welcome to the Fast Take. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
I'm Jack Murphy.
Welcome to another Fast Take. Last week we did our Thanksgiving message for all of our wonderful listeners, and this week we're jumping right back into it. And we're talking about the episode, the last main episode to this, which was Roe versus Wade versus the military. And in that episode, we talked with Stripes reporter Nancy Montgomery, which she wrote the story that really inspired this episode because she talked with Barry. She kind of gave her story through a written article. And one of the things that I've always wanted to be part of the focus and mission statement of Military Matters was stories from folks in their words. Jack and I are here to just kind of collect these stories and help tell them, but it's really the people we talk to. It's their words, their voice, their expertise, their stories, their experiences. So I wanted to talk with Barry, and I had that chance. And to call this the story of a botched Japanese abortion is, I think, really simplifying what's at work here. And we have to talk about the Roe versus Wade piece, the Hyde Amendment, which kind of all goes together. Jack, I'm going to throw the ball over into your court. As a seasoned journalist, what were you thinking about when the Supreme Court repealed that landmark ruling, Roe versus Wade? It gets repealed. You are a guy like myself. We probably don't have the same amount of skin in the game, but what were you thinking about? And from your perspective as a journalist, what was going through your mind when this repeal came out?
Yeah. Well, as you say, I mean, I'm not necessarily the most qualified person to weigh in on the topic, but I mean, to be completely honest, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind is that this isn't really going to affect upper middle class white women so much. They're going to travel across state lines. They're going to go and they're going to get the medical treatment that they need. It's going to become more difficult, but they're never going to have access blocked from them, right? Really. Then what occurred to me is that what this is really going to hit is poor people, minority communities, people who, I mean, if you're 16 and you're Black and you live in an impoverished community, I mean, you're screwed. You're really screwed.
It's interesting you said, because we're seeing the pendulums are not just swinging, but they're kind of inverting a little bit. We're seeing a larger population of poor Caucasians. That population is increasing as well. So when I agree with you, rich white women may not be as affected as this, but that white, and I think this is important to distinguish. When we say white, it's not just saying and or, this is and.
Yeah,
there are lots of poor white people.
It's more related to poverty than it is to race. But then you can also argue exactly. Like poverty is linked to race also. So, I mean, these things kind of are interrelated to one another.
Exactly. And as more blue collar positions in the world, more blue collar industries are being decimated, being removed. And a lot of folks are finding themselves in these precarious situations. And the fact is, poverty, this is a big factor here. And this goes into the Hyde Amendment, right? The Hyde Amendment back in the 70s was originally designed to take Medicare. I get those two confused all the freaking time. Go listen to the podcast, folks. But it's the one that affects the poor people and people with lower incomes. It's basically saying that the government's not going to pay for that abortion because you're using those programs. And who's on those programs? Impoverished people. And all the demographics that encompasses. So, but you're right. It was difficult for me to do this episode in a way because, to your point, Jack, I'm not really, I don't feel like I'm really equipped to have a say in this discussion, right? I mean, it's kind of weird being a guy talking about women's reproductive rights and I mentioned this in the episode, when it's men that are in the legislation, that are part of the legislative process, men making the decisions, men that are the scientists doing most of the work, doing the research and presenting the findings. I mean, I didn't want to be accused of mansplaining, abortion, reproductive rights to the world. We've talked about some of the details of Barry's experiences. And one of the things that Barry brings up is that during the abortion in Japan, that she felt like she was being purposefully punished or treated harshly by the Japanese doctors. And she says that this could be cultural. Jack, what are your thoughts on that? You had an interesting story to share.
Well, a couple stories, and I mean, one of them was right here on Military Matters. If you recall the case of Michael Taylor, who was extradited to Japan along with his son Peter, and quick update on that: they've both been returned to the United States. So they're in a much better situation now, thankfully. But I bring that up because in the course of that reporting that story, you find out that the Japanese have like a 99.8% conviction rate in their courts. And it's because it's a shame-based culture. Like, if you are being prosecuted, you're supposed to feel the shame and accept this responsibility, whether you're guilty or not. Accept the shame of this and just accept your punishment. Hence this high conviction rate. I also have a friend of mine who his wife is Japanese. She got they have a couple kids, and he was telling me that it was kind of like a bit of a big deal that his wife was in the hospital pregnant in her 30s, and that the doctors were kind of looking at her like, what weren't you supposed to get this out of your system in your 20s? Like, what are you doing here? So the story that the doctor in Japan may have been punishing that woman is, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know the specifics, but it could quite, I mean, I'm not surprised, right?
Yeah, definitely cultural influence was probably a heavy factor into this. If you're looking to make a career change or still trying to find your path outside the military, I recommend checking out Sabio, the coding bootcamp and developer community that's helped so many veterans become successful software engineers. Sabio teaches you the skills to start a real high-paying tech job in just 17 weeks, online and from the comfort of your own home. Visit sabio.la/military to learn how you can use your VA benefits to enroll. That's sabio.la/military. I do want to reiterate that the show sometimes approaches politically sensitive subjects. Jack and I are never, we aren't ones to shy away from controversy. That's the point of being a journalist, I think, is to wade into those waters and bring those stories. But it's really for you, the listener, to make up your own opinion based on whatever ethical or moral guidelines you hold yourself accountable to. I'm not here to tell you abortion is good, abortion is bad. That's for you to decide. That is your moral yardstick, as I said in the podcast. This is a story. I'm presenting to you a story of how Roe versus Wade, its repeal, and the Hyde Amendment have affected one service member, and that is an illustration of how it could affect thousands of other service members, women service members, as I've said in the podcast. Jack, what are your thoughts on politically charged stories like this?
Well, I think you said it quite well, and that's the goal, really. It's not to tell people who to vote for or what to believe. It's to present this information out there. And I have had in my work, and I also do a podcast where I have people tell me all the time that this is left wing, or then other times this is right wing. And it's a lot of times it's because the guest has a point of view that they express. And nowadays there is a feeling that if you are platforming that person, then you must agree with them. But we both interview all kinds of different people who have all sorts of different point of views. And those point of views are not necessarily mine personally. But we're going to have those kinds of conversations. And you rightly point out that the point is for people to hear these points of views and to hear this information and then take that along with their own sense of morality, their own personal experiences, their politics, their religious faith, whatever it is, and arrive at their own conclusions. So I think when people get a little upset with the interviewer or with a reporter, in some cases, it's a little bit misguided. It's like, well, that information is there. Like, don't neglect your own agency, your own ability to make up your own mind about this. We're not trying to force feed it to you. It's there for you to help you make up your mind in, whichever direction you're going in.
I love the fact that you and I both have been accused of being right-wing fanatics, left-wing shills, that we have we've sold out was one of the comments in our reviews that I read once, that we sold out. I try, and I think we both try very hard to just try and tell the story without leaning left or right. But it's really hard to tell these stories when I am on my island that I bought with all of my shill money. So
that fortune George Soros
Jack,
gave you.
Yeah, exactly. Little fact. Jack does all these interviews wearing a top hat and a monocle. We do rich people stuff because we're dark and we're part of the Illuminati. Yeah, I think it's great. I love the fact that we've been accused of being both left and right, which, folks, my biggest advice to you is listen to the episodes before you make assessments. I'm sure that people have not listened to this episode and quickly formed an opinion based on the fact that it's titled Roe versus Wade versus the military. The same way folks wrote that I was a left-wing sympathizer because of woke, the story on woke, and that same title made people write reviews that we were right-wing leaning because they didn't read about it. They thought we were saying that the military was so woke, it was going to hell in a handbasket because it's woke. And other folks were like, "Oh, you're saying the military's woke, and that's a great thing." And it's wonderful.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say. you know the deal, man. I know. You can even write an article and newspapers publish articles that are clearly labeled opinion or op-ed, and people don't know. The average reader just doesn't understand the difference between those things, between that and actual news stories. And I mean, the papers take some blame. I mean, they publish bombastic op-eds because it brings in the hate clicks, right? I have my own rant on this subject about the state of the news and the press. And, I mean, nobody's really happy with the state of the media, right? Everyone has, sometimes for different reasons and different complaints. And I guess I have my rant as well. I mean, I just say it's quite difficult. And a lot of times the listeners say they want something. And that may not be actually accurate. That may be fact news in of itself. A lot of people find fact-based news to be incredibly boring and really aren't that interested in it.
And that's a great point. We like things that make us feel stuff. We like things that make us feel happy or sad, angry or calmed. Nobody likes textbooks, but we will sure as hell pick up a copy of the Sun or the Inquirer or the Washington Post, the New York Times, or the Hollywood Reporter. And by God, we feel a certain way about something. Well, anyways, folks, go check out our episode, Roe versus Wade versus the military. Of course, you can find it everywhere you listen to podcasts. Make sure you check out stripes.com. Use promo code podcast. Get 50% off your your digital subscription to Stars and Stripes. And that's it for us in this episode. That loud clunking sound is my dog deciding to just flop on the floor over here. Folks, that does it for this episode. I'm Rod Rodriguez. That's Jack Murphy. And we will see you at the next episode. Be sure to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter at StripesMMPod. And if you have a tip or story idea, shoot us an email at militarymatters@stripes.com. Don't forget, you can get 50% off your digital subscription to Stars and Stripes today. Just use promo code podcast and get 50% off your digital subscription. That's promo code podcast. This episode is brought to you by Sabio, the #1 coding bootcamp for veterans. Visit sabio.la/military to learn more. Thank you for listening. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
I'm Jack Murphy.
And we'll see you at the next episode.